Democrats are melting down as they've decided to be on the wrong side of history once again. This time around, even mainstream media is confused by their antics. Watch out for that. And we have some good news for seniors who buy prescription drugs after a shocking announcement from President Trump. We've got a lot to cover, but real quick, if you want to keep yourself informed with Social Security, US politics, and global news, then make sure to subscribe.
Someone we know was the most qualified and would have been a fantastic president in a President Harris. And look, we wouldn't wake up every day to a bunch of shit on TV and a bunch of nonsense. We would wake up to an adult with compassion and dignity and vision and leadership doing the work, not a man-child crying about whatever's wrong with him. May his fat ankles find something today.
I need to inform you that the president has chronic venous insufficiency. That's why he's saying that. So it's great to see that Tim Walz hasn't developed much class since last year. I'm also glad to know that he's still salty about losing the presidential and vice presidential race last year. And he's saying all of this as the Trump administration is literally fixing the mess left behind by the Biden-Harris term. This is further proven by just how far their party has fallen. Even CNN is reporting that they've taken a turn for the worse.
The Democratic brand right now has about the appeal with the American voter as the Cracker Barrel rebrand has with the American consumers. Bad, bad, bad. What are you doing? Oh, my goodness gracious. What are we talking about here in terms of big party registration changes in the key swing states? Let's look at the key 4 swing states that, in fact, do keep track of registration by party. Look, the Republican Party is in their best position at this point in the cycle since at least 2005 in all 4 of these key battleground states.
But it can't all be that bad, right? This is CNN. They're probably gonna find a way to spin this story to give the left some sort of bright side. Well, the numbers aren't really going their way, and Harry Enton gave Democrats the wake-up call that I think they needed.
Are there any bright spots for Democrats? Have they picked up any ground since January 1 in terms of party registration? Not in these key swing states, these 4 key swing states. What are we talking about? Party registration margin gain since January 1, 2025. Which party's gained in Arizona? The GOP. How about Nevada? The GOP. North Carolina? The GOP. How about in Pennsylvania? We'll make it 4 for 4, the GOP. So Republicans looking pretty gosh darn good, at least when it comes to party registration. And we'll see what happens down the road. But at this point, as I said at the beginning, the Democratic brand is in about as good a position as the Cracker Barrel rebrand. It is bad, bad, bad for the Democrat.
The bad news doesn't end there, at least for the left. With the success that they've had in DC, President Trump is now thinking about fixing the crime situation in Chicago next.
Chicago, Illinois is a disaster. I have property there. It's a disaster what's going on in Chicago. And you get Pritzker, he's violating our rights. I think this is another men and women's sports thing. I think this is one of those, they call them 80-20 issues. I call them 97-3. I think the Democrats better get smart. And, politically, I hope they don't. But actually, in terms of love for the country, I hope they do, because it would be good to work together. So I'm thinking about, when I have some slob like Pritzker criticizing us before we even go there, I made the statement that next should be Chicago, because as you all know, Chicago is a killing field right now.
Now we're going to get to the officials of Chicago in a bit, but I want to show you what Congressman Jamie Raskin is saying about this. It's actually really funny. He's saying that we shouldn't care about crime because crime is a part of U.S. history.
Law enforcement purposes. In D.C., he was talking about cleaning up the graffiti and, dealing with the blight of homelessness, which are obviously local, not federal issues. And he's trying to militarize our society, intimidate his political opponents. The whole idea of picking cities based on their partisan leadership is absurd. I mean, there are lots of Republican cities and towns struggling with crime. Everybody is across the country. Always. Crime has always been part of our history, and yet crime is down. In D.C., for example, it's at a 30-year low.
Do you know why they keep citing that crime in DC is at a 30-year low? Because it wouldn't help their narrative if they compared it to these past few years where crime shot up. And this is something that many blue cities and states are dealing with. Which brings me to Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. He got fed a layup question by MSNBC, and yet he completely chokes on his response.
I'm curious, would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago? Would that help drive down crime?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that. You've talked about the other things you want, and I said those are good and important programs, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful to go along with all of those social programs that a lot of cities are engaging in and having success with?
Well, look, here's the best way I can put it, Joe, is that in the 90s when I was in high school, we had 3,000 more police officers and we had 900 people being murdered every single year in Chicago. It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that
that's not the question I asked.
That is Morning Joe, literally dumbfounded by a mayor who can't even give a straight answer to the simplest question, which really makes you wonder, how did this guy get his job in Chicago? I want you to notice what CNN is pushing against the White House's Stephen Miller, with one of their guests going way beyond the line.
It would be journalistic integrity to point out that he is a white supremacist and he is the brainchild behind this policy. That's not my opinion. That's actual facts. And for him to purport lies from the Oval Office as a white supremacist,
I don't know.
it should be pointed out. It's reporting Washington Wall Street Journal's own reporting.
Let's be honest here. It's never been about race. It's always been about facts. But that's something that hardline liberals have a hard time accepting. Now let's get to some good news here, as President Trump just made a stunning announcement about drug prices.
Favored nations, where I'm going to be reducing drug prices by 1,500%, where a pill that sells in Germany for $10 costs $150 here because of the bad price. And I was all set to do it, and then we had the COVID come up, and I had to focus on that because we had the greatest economy in history my first term. I will tell you that we are going to be doing numbers on the cost of drugs in this country that I'm not talking about a 20% decrease, which would be great. I'm talking about 1,000% decrease. We're talking about where a product would sell for $80 in Germany and $1,300 here. And we're not going to do that.
This is something that will benefit not just seniors, but millions and millions of Americans across the nation. Although I understand Democrats will still spin this to be bad news for us. But what do you think of it? Before I go, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to keep this community growing. Thank you for your time today. Talk to you in the next one.